There are those families that gradually fall apart, with fractures appearing over the course of years until the ground ultimately gives way. In a single night, mine cracked on a road that was saturated in rain, and on that road, my parents abandoned me to die. The mathematics seemed straightforward to them. One daughter who suffers from a chronic illness is equivalent to an excessive amount of medical costs, an excessive amount of sacrifice, and an excessively heavy load. As a result, they made their decision, drove away, and abandoned the girl with a deteriorating body behind them like garbage. She was left behind. The headlights that came after theirs had faded were never seen by them since they never looked back. Never experienced the presence that had been lurking in the shadows yet was always present. They had no idea that I would make it through. They referred to me as their most significant burden. In reality, I turned out to be their worst nightmare. It would be great if you could tell me where you are watching today, just before we come back to the main topic. In addition, if you are enjoying these tales, you should make sure that you are subscribed to the show because the special episode that will air tomorrow is one that you will not want to miss. During our journey through the night, the rain pounded the windshield, and each drop of rain echoed the oppressive quiet that pervaded the interior of our family automobile. My slender fingers traced the fog that my breath generated on the window while I sat in the back seat of the vehicle for a while. The situation was not right. I was able to sense it even though I was under the influence of pain medicine. This evening, the air inside the automobile was entirely different. My voice was barely audible above the storm and the continuous swish of the windshield wipers as I questioned my father. "Dad, where are we going that we are going? It is becoming late for a scheduled appointment with the doctor." There was no response coming from the front seat. All that could be heard was the white, bloodless muscles of my father's knuckles clenching on the driving wheel. The profile of my mother was highlighted by the intermittent bolts of lightning as she appeared to be staring straight ahead. It had been weeks since I had last seen her gaze at me directly. The name I go by is Leah Wells. Tonight, everything would be different for me because I am 17 years old. I was 12 years old when I first began to experience symptoms of the neurological problems. In the beginning, it was just a few tremors here and there that were attributed to growing pains or anxiousness. My desire for a cane began when I was 14 years old. At the age of 16, I had become accustomed to the wheelchair that was folded up and stored in our trunk, and personnel at the hospital greeted me by name. With every new doctor, procedure, and prescription that promised relief but delivered nothing but adverse effects, my parents' funds continued to diminish. The last thing that my father said was, "We're almost there," and his voice was unremarkable and unaccustomed. The vehicle slowed down as we made the turn into a country road that I was unfamiliar with. The shadows of the trees that were on each side of us danced in the headlights of our vehicle. My back was in excruciating pain when I shifted in an uncomfortable manner. I was beginning to feel the effects of my medication, and the tremors were about to begin. "You, Mom." In an effort to capture her sight in the rearview mirror, I came forward and leaned forward. I believe that I should take my next dose earlier than usual. The rough path is the one. You won't have any problems. Her voice was icier than I had ever heard it before, and she abruptly cut me off. A jolt of recollection came to me. I am 8 years old. It was a chocolate cake that had rainbow sprinkles that had been cooked by Mom. I was the tallest 8-year-old in the country because my father had taken me onto his shoulders and pulled me up to the point where I could touch the ceiling. In addition to making me laugh, my brother Caleb, who is 9 years older than me and already towers over me, gave me a bracelet made of colored string that he had created himself. He had stated that there was one hue for each year. Next year, on my birthday, I will add another one. I had not yet removed the bracelet from the drawer in my home. To add the 9th hue was never an option for him. Caleb had vanished from our life when he was 17 years old, following a heated confrontation with our father that caused the walls of our home to shake violently. The sudden absence of my father left me bewildered and heartbroken when I was only 8 years old. Although Mom would simply state that he had gone to make his own way, the hollow expression that she had in her eyes informed me that there was more to the story than first appeared. I was brought back to the here and now by the noise of the car coming to a halt. Still a great distance from any other location, we were standing on a dirt shoulder next to the main road. Nothing except darkness, rain, and the distant rumble of thunder could be heard. There were no houses and no street lights. My dad shut off the engine of the vehicle. Without turning back, he shouted loudly, "Get out!" With trepidation, I laughed. What is it? It's pouring as hell, Dad. This is some kind of prank, isn't it? Get away of here. The rhythmic tapping of his fingers on the driving wheel served as a punctuation mark for each individual syllable. Grab your backpack and go. We gathered all of your need. When I looked down, I saw a tiny backpack lying on the ground close to where I was standing. At the time that we left our house, it was not there. You, Mom. My voice was trembling. What really is going on? It was eventually my mother who turned. Her face was a mask that I was unable to perceive. Leia, we are no longer able to attempt this, as well as the ongoing treatment and the medical bills. Observing your worsening condition. Everything that we possess has been given. I muttered, but I'm your daughter, as a chilling terror raced across my chest. My dad told me in a direct manner, you are a burden. There is nothing left for us. Without any savings, retirement, or life outside of hospitals, there is no life. My mother continued, her voice seeming mechanical, that the help from the community had stopped years ago. Some people moved on. The fundraising efforts came to an end. Experimental treatments are not going to be covered by the insurance. We simply cannot continue to watch you go through this. It seems that you are going to abandon me on the side of the road. The words that were pouring out of my mouth didn't make any sense to me. Not a single one of them responded. After popping the trunk, my father stepped out into the rain and continued walking. Immediately after he stepped around to my door and yanked it open, the rain began to drench the back seat from the inside. I pleaded my father, please, as I shivered and felt the chilly rain touch my flesh. No matter what I did, I apologize. I'll make a greater effort, and I won't let him disturb me. You are what you have become, and it is what you are. The warmth of the automobile was removed from me as his hand wrapped around my arm and pulled me away. Almost quickly, my legs, which were weak and unstable, gave out. As the pain went through my hip, I collapsed into the muddy shoulder and landed hard on my side and fell to the ground. Your backpack, he remarked as he tossed it next to me. It landed in a puddle, and water immediately was soaked through the fabric. I gazed up at the people who had given me life, who had once tucked me in at night and checked for monsters under my bed. Their faces were expressionless. There were no tears, no shame, and nothing that could be interpreted as love or sorrow. Why? I asked. While my mother turned her head away, my father simply turned around and walked back to the driver's side of the vehicle. I found the strength to inquire through my trembling teeth. No farewells, no words of love, no words of consolation, not even words of regret, just silence and the slam of car doors. The engine roared to life, and they drove away, the tail lights quickly disappearing into the stormy night. I attempted to stand up, but my legs refused to cooperate. The tremors had begun in earnest now, and they were intensified by the cold and fear. I crawled toward the edge of the road, seeking shelter in the shallow ditch. Rain pounded my back, soaking through my thin sweater. Headlights appeared in the distance, and hope surged within me. I raised a trembling hand, trying to signal for help. The truck slowed slightly as it passed, but then accelerated away, leaving me alone once more. This couldn't be real. This was a nightmare, a fever dream brought on by medication. My parents would not abandon me. They could not. However, the cold mud that was seeping through my clothes and the icy rain that was falling on my skin told me otherwise. I do not know how long I lay there, slipping in and out of consciousness as the storm continued its assault. The minutes or hours seemed to blur together. Through my blurred vision, I noticed headlights far behind me, dimmed as if the car had been parked some distance away. Had someone followed us? Had someone seen? I heard a car door open and close. My thoughts began to fragment, and I recalled birthdays and hospital rooms, as well as my brother's laughter and my mother's eyes that were becoming increasingly distant. Footsteps approached, splashing through puddles. A tall figure materialized through the curtain of rain, walking purposefully toward me. Fear gripped me. Was this a good Samaritan or someone who would finish what my parents had started? I tried to call out, but my voice was lost in a clap of thunder. The figure crouched beside me, shielding me slightly from the rain. A gentle hand brushed wet hair from my face. "It's okay," a man's voice whispered, somehow familiar yet changed by years. "I never forgot you." I struggled to focus on his face, but darkness crowded the edges of my vision. Strong arms lifted me carefully, cradling me against a warm chest. "You're safe now. I promise." The voice murmured as consciousness slipped away. "Caleb," I whispered, though I wasn't sure the name actually passed my lips before the world completely faded away. My last thought before blackness claimed me was that I knew those words. I knew that voice from somewhere deep in my past. It was a voice that belonged to bedtime stories and protective arguments. It was a voice that belonged to a brother who had disappeared from my life nearly 10 years ago. Warmth. That was the first sensation that greeted me as consciousness slowly returned. Warmth and the gentle crackling of a fire. Not the cold, wet ditch where my life had shattered, but somewhere safe, dry, and quiet. I opened my eyes to unfamiliar surroundings, a rustic room with wooden walls, a low ceiling with exposed beams, and a small wood-burning stove in the corner casting an orange glow across the space. The steady powder of rain continued to sound on the roof, but it was a distant, comforting sound now, not the brutal deluge that had soaked through to my bones. I was lying on a bed that was covered with thick quilts, and 4 people stood beside me with clear fluid dripping steadily into a line connected to my arm. My clothes had been changed, and I was wearing a soft flannel nightgown that I did not recognize. Clean clothes were folded neatly on a chair a short distance away. "You are awake." The voice came from the doorway, and it caused me to startle. There were several framed photographs hanging on the wall opposite my bed. Even from this distance, I could make out what appeared to be landscapes, mountains, forests, and a lake at sunset. Another photograph showed the silhouette of a man standing on the edge of a cliff, backlit by dawn. Caleb was the name of the tall man who stood there with a steaming mug in his hands. He was in his late 20s and had broad shoulders and the lean muscular build of someone who worked with his hands. His brown hair was slightly too long, curling at the nape of his neck, and stubble shadowed his jaw. However, it was his eyes that caught my attention. They were a deep blue color and carried a familiar shape that I had seen in my own mirror every day. My voice was barely a whisper, hoarse from disuse. How long had I been unconscious? He went into the room, laying the mug on a tiny table beside the bed. "Hey, Lia Bean," he said quietly, using a nickname I hadn't heard in nearly a decade. I struggled to sit up, hurting as my body protested. Caleb rushed immediately to assist me, adjusting the cushions behind my back with the ease that comes with years of experience. "How? When is it?" As he handed me the mug, he continued, I couldn't form complete questions because my mind was spinning with confusion. "Drink this first. It's just tea with honey. Your throat sounds rough." I took a careful sip, and the warm drink soothed my parched throat. "It's just tea with honey." The realization of my predicament came crashing down on me as the physical comfort I had been experiencing gradually returned. "They left me," I muttered, my voice breaking. Caleb's countenance became more stern, and his jaw became more tense as he said, "My parents, they just drove away." "I know. I saw you were there. You followed them," he said with a nod while sitting on the edge of the bed. "Leia, I've been keeping an eye on them for weeks." I had a feeling that something was wrong, but how did you even find me? "You've been gone for years. No calls, no letters, nothing." The pain that I'd buried for such a long time came to the surface. Caleb looked down at his hands, which were strong and calloused. There was a small scar across the right knuckle that hadn't been there when he was 17 years old. He said in a quiet voice, "It's a long story. But the short story is that I never really left you. I left them." The words hung in the air between us as my thoughts raced back to that night. The shouting, doors slamming, my father's voice roaring through the home. "If you walk out that door, don't ever come back. Dad kicked you out," I whispered. Fragments of memory clicking into place. "But why? What happened?" Caleb's laugh was bitter. "I stood up to him about your medical care. You'd just been diagnosed and he was refusing to take you to a specialist in Boston. Said we couldn't afford it." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. "I'd saved up some money from my summer jobs, offered to help pay. He said I was undermining his authority, that I didn't understand what it meant to be responsible for a family." I remembered how tensions had been building in our house as my symptoms worsened, how my father had grown increasingly short-tempered as medical bills piled up. "The night I left," Caleb continued, "I overheard him talking to Mom about selling the house, moving somewhere cheaper, somewhere without access to the specialized care you needed. I confronted him. Things escalated and he shrugged. At 17, with no high school diploma yet and $50 in my pocket, there wasn't much I could do. But that was 9 years ago, I said. Why didn't you ever contact me? Pain flashed across his face. I tried, Leah. I wrote letters they sent back unopened. I called, and your father threatened to have me arrested for harassment. Once, when I was in a state of extreme desperation, I went to your school, but they had already informed the administration that I was not permitted to be near you. The realization hit me like a blow to the body. For all these years, I had believed that my brother had simply left me behind and forgotten about me. How many times had I stared at the phone, hoping that it would ring with his voice on the other end? I asked, "Where did you go? What happened to you?" He admitted that he had been homeless for a period of time. He had slept in shelters when he could, in his car when he had one, worked odd jobs, construction, dishwashing, whatever, paid cash, and gotten into some trouble. I looked around the cabin. I bought it 3 years ago. It was a wreck then. It took me a year of nights and weekends to make it livable. It is off-grid and hard to find, which is one of the reasons I chose it. He gestured vaguely to a small tattoo on his forearm that I had not noticed before. However, eventually I got my GED, found work as a student, and found this place. Leah, while you were unconscious, I made some calls, checked hospital records, and talked to an old friend who works in social services. It is more difficult for them to find you if you don't leave a digital footprint. You were hiding. You were not hiding. You were just staying under their radar. It is more difficult for them to find you if you don't leave a digital footprint. He hesitated. Your parents did not simply leave you behind. They depleted your medical fund, which was the one that was collected from all of those community fundraisers when you were first diagnosed. Furthermore, they reported you as having voluntarily fled. The mug almost fell out of my hands. What? Why would they do that? Caleb said with a grim expression. And to cover themselves legally. They're trying to make it look like you chose to leave, not that they abandoned their disabled minor daughter on a deserted road in the middle of a storm. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. Not just left behind, but erased, rewritten as the villain in my own story. I've been documenting everything, Caleb continued, pulling out his phone to show me a folder of files. The withdrawal from your medical fund. Their movements that night, timestamps from my dash cam showing them leaving you on that road. His voice was steady, but his eyes burned with controlled anger. I don't want revenge, Leah. I want justice. I felt tears spilling down my cheeks, hot and unstoppable. Why didn't you come sooner? I whispered. All these years. He gently took my hand. By the time I found you, you were already 17 years old, and I was putting together a case. Caleb's composure began to crack, and pain began to etch lines around his eyes. I had been searching for you for years, checking hospital records, joining online support groups for your condition, and even driving past our old house in the hopes of catching a glimpse of you. Gratitude and confusion, grief and relief, all tangled together in a knot that I couldn't unravel, and I broke down completely, years of lonely suffering pouring out in wrenching sobs. I wanted to do this right, and I wanted to make sure that they could never take you away again. As the weight of his words sank in, emotions that I couldn't name flooded through me. Caleb moved closer, hesitating only a moment before wrapping his arms around me. He held me as I cried, his own tears falling silently into my hair. I'm sorry, he whispered over and over. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you better. When my tears finally subsided, leaving me exhausted and hollow, I asked the question that had been forming at the back of my mind. What happens now? Caleb pulled back, wiping his face with his sleeve. Now you heal physically, yes, but he gestured to his chest. In here, too. And then when you're ready, we're going to show the world who you really are. I didn't fully understand what he meant, but the fierce protectiveness in his voice gave me the first glimmer of hope I'd felt in years. During the time that he was up to fix my 4 on the bedside table, I saw that there was a leather-bound journal that had not been there before. What exactly is that? I inquired. I found it hidden in a storage unit that they rented under her maiden name, Caleb said as he picked it up and turned it over in his hands before putting it out to me. His look was indecipherable. It belonged to our mother. I took the journal and felt its weight. Not just the weight of the physical, but the weight of secrets and history that I wasn't sure I was ready to face. Caleb said, "Rest now," as he moved toward the door, "because we have all the time in the world to figure this out. I believe that you should read it. There is more to this story than even I understood." I ran my fingers over the worn leather cover as he left. Whatever was contained within these pages might provide answers to the questions that had been bothering me for years, or it might bring up new questions entirely. Either way, I was no longer alone. For the first time in almost a decade, I had someone fighting for me. I opened the journal to its first page and started reading. The sun had been shining through the handmade curtains of the cabin, casting a warm glow across the wooden floorboards. It had been 3 weeks since the night that my parents had abandoned me. It had been 3 weeks of slow healing, of adjusting to this new reality where I was no longer alone. Anna, a woman in her mid-30s with close-cropped dark hair and keen brown eyes, instructed me to put my arms up. "Now hold it for 10 seconds. I raised my trembling arms, gritting my teeth against the burning sensation in my muscles. Anna watched with professional detachment, but I'd come to recognize the subtle signs of approval in her expression, the slight nod, the way the corners of her eyes crinkled when I pushed through pain. Anna Kim wasn't just Caleb's friend. 7, 8, 9, 10, excellent, she said as I lowered my arms, sweat beading on my forehead despite the cool morning air. You've gained 5 degrees of mobility in your shoulders since we started working together. She was a former military medic who now worked at a small clinic 30 meters away. She came by 3 times a week to assist me with my physical therapy and check me on my medication regimen. To which I muttered, "Doesn't feel like much," as I reached for the water bottle that was sitting next to me. "Healing isn't linear," Anna responded, making notes in a small medical journal. "Your body has been through significant trauma, and that's not counting the psychological impact of what happened." What happened? Such a simple phrase for an event that had shattered my world. The door to the cabin opened, and Caleb entered carrying a basket of vegetables. This basket contained carrots with earth still clinging to their roots, leafy greens, and early tomatoes. "Garden's coming along nicely," he announced, setting the basket on the kitchen counter. Even after 3 weeks, I had a hard time processing the reality that my parents had abandoned me to die purposefully. "How is the meeting going so far?" Anna observed. "Your sister is making good progress," while she was packing up her equipment. "However, she is impatient," Caleb said with a wink in my direction. "It runs in the family." After Anna left, promising to return in 2 days, Caleb helped me to the porch where a comfortable chair awaited. Over the course of the preceding several weeks, I had gradually explored the land, or more accurately, what Caleb referred to as the sanctuary. On the outside, the cabin appeared to be uncomplicated, with weathered wood and a metal roof that made a pleasant sound when it rained. However, on the inside, it was surprisingly well appointed with a number of unexpected conveniences, including solar-powered electricity, a compact but functional kitchen, and even satellite internet access that was concealed behind a sophisticated firewall system. The most surprising thing was the hidden underground room that was accessible through what appeared to be a root cellar. This room was filled with emergency supplies, backup generators, and a sophisticated computer setup. The cabin was located on several acres of wooded land that stretched beyond it. The land included a greenhouse where Caleb grew vegetables throughout the year, a small workshop, and a stream that provided fresh water. The comment had landed with a weight that suggested truth beneath the humor. Now, sitting on the porch with a blanket across my legs despite the summer warmth, I watched as Caleb tended to the garden. Caleb had joked that it was not paranoia if they were really after you. However, the comment had landed with a weight that suggested truth beneath the humor. The physical labor had shaped him into someone very different from the lanky teenager I remembered. All lean muscle and purpose, movements economical and precise. "You never told me how you learned all this," I called out, gesturing to the property, the gardening, the carpentry, the off-grid systems. Caleb straightened, wiping sweat from his brow. "Necessity, mostly. When you are unable to afford to hire a repairman, you have to figure things out on your own." He walked over and settled on the porch steps. "In addition, I had a fantastic teacher. The mentor you mentioned." He nodded, his demeanor softening with the recollection of the mentor. "Frank, I met him when I was working construction in Denver. He caught me sleeping in my car during a snowstorm and dragged me to his cabin. He said I could stay until spring if I made myself useful." "How long did you stay?" Caleb admitted that he had been there for almost 3 years. He taught me everything, including how to build, how to grow food, and how to live without leaving a trace. He was an older guy who had served in Vietnam and lived off the land for the majority of his life. But mostly he taught me about justice. Justice. Frank had this saying, "Revenge burns you up, but justice lights the way." Caleb turned to me, his eyes serious. "When I found out what happened to you, my first instinct was pure rage. I wanted to hurt them the way they hurt you." Frank helped me channel that into something constructive. I was reminded of the mysterious journal known as Our Mother's Journal, which I had been reading slowly out of fear of what I might find within its pages. I asked Caleb in a low voice, "Have you read it all?" "Mom's journal." Caleb's expression darkened. It was enough to notice that there was something more significant going on. The entries about the deal they made. "I believe it has something to do with your medical condition." "You think my illness isn't natural?" The question had been haunting me since I'd read those cryptic entries. "I don't know," Caleb admitted. "But I intend to find out." That night, as had become our routine, we sat by the wood stove while a summer storm battered the cabin. The sound of rain on the metal roof created a cocoon of white noise that felt oddly protective. I asked, "Tell me more about your life," while curled up in what had become my chair. "You mentioned a failed engagement." Caleb's smile was bittersweet. Hannah had met him in Colorado many years ago. He was smart, humorous, and worked as an environmental lawyer. He peered into his mug of tea. Hannah desired a normal existence. "Because of me?" I asked softly. "Because of everything," he corrected. "My past, my need to stay off the grid, the nightmares that had me waking up screaming." He sighed because we tried for almost 2 years, but eventually she gave me back the ring. I couldn't give her a house in the suburbs, kids, and Sunday dinners with her parents. I couldn't give her that. "I'm sorry," I mumbled. "Don't be." I had been suffering while Caleb had been sacrificing his normal life to hunt for me and to establish this hidden refuge. She said that she hoped I would find peace eventually. The revelation caused my heart to throb. Every choice I made, I'd make again. His voice was firm. "You're my sister, Leia. Family isn't supposed to be conditional." The words hung between us, a stark contrast to the brutal lesson our parents had taught me. Sleep didn't come easily that night. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed of the rainy roadside, of being abandoned. But in the dream, no one came to save me. I woke gasping, sheets tangled around my legs. My body sheened with sweat despite the cool night air. The next day, during physical therapy, I collapsed. The tremors overwhelmed me and frustration exploded into tears. "I hate this," I cried, pounding my fist against the floor. "I hate being broken." Anna didn't rush to comfort me or offer empty platitudes. Rather than that, she sat on the floor next to me with her legs crossed and a serious expression on her face. "You know why I quit the military?" I was able to hold back my tears as she asked me the question. I shook my head. IED explosion. 3 members of my crew were killed. I escaped, but I was not without scars. She rolled up her sleeve to reveal undulating burn tissue that ran from her wrist to her elbow. Her eyes held mine steadily. Then, one night, I put a gun in my mouth. I gasped softly. "Obviously, I didn't pull the trigger," she continued. Her voice was matter-of-fact because my dog knocked over a lamp at just the right moment. I had convinced myself that I was broken for months. I used alcohol to numb the pain. I pushed away anyone who tried to help. Her eyes held mine steadily. Scared the hell out of me. Made me drop the gun. A small smile touched her lips. "Stupid, right? Survived war only to be saved by a clumsy Labrador." "What happened then?" I asked. I realized something important. Survival isn't enough. You can breathe and eat and sleep and still be dying inside. She helped me back into my wheelchair. The real work begins when you decide to live, not just survive. That afternoon, I asked Caleb to take me to the computer room. It was time to start my own investigation into what had happened to me. Not just the abandonment, but the years of illness that had preceded it. "We need to look into their financial records," I said. Determination fueling my voice. And I want to search for information about experimental treatments for neurological conditions. Caleb raised an eyebrow but didn't question my sudden interest. He showed me how to use the secure computer system, explaining the precautions that kept our searches from being traced. Hours blended into days as we built our case. I contributed by documenting my medical history and creating timelines of treatments and their effects. Caleb had already gathered a substantial amount of evidence, including bank statements that showed the emptying of my medical fund, GPS data from the night they abandoned me, and recordings of phone calls he had made to hospitals asking about my whereabouts. Anna burst into the cabin without knocking on the door one evening as I was writing in the journal that my mother had left behind, adding my own entries next to hers. As I worked, strange patterns emerged, including treatments that seemed to make my symptoms worse, doctors who appeared briefly in my care, and doctors who were replaced without explanation. "You've been made," she said breathlessly, her eyes wide with urgency. 2 men came to the clinic today asking questions about a missing girl. "They had your photo, Leah." Caleb was on his feet instantly. "Government, police." Anna shook her head. "Private." They didn't identify themselves, but one flashed what looked like a corporate security badge when he thought I wasn't looking. My blood ran cold. "I don't know how they know to come to your clinic," she admitted. "However, they knew exactly what you look like, right down to the birthmark that is on your wrist." They claimed that they were relatives, but she hesitated. "But what?" Caleb pressed them. They didn't appear concerned. They appeared determined, as if this was a retrieval operation, rather than a rescue. My hands shook as I showed it to Caleb, and his face hardened into a mask of controlled fury as he read it. Later that night, after Anna had left with promises to alert us if the men returned, I discovered a letter that had been slipped under the cabin door. It was a plain white envelope with no return address, and inside was a single typed line that read, "You were never meant to survive. Stop digging." He whispered, "Come with me," as he led me to the computer room. He then activated a monitor that I had never seen before, which was a security feed that displayed different angles of the property. "Look," he said, pointing to a timestamp from earlier that day, when both of us had been at Anna's clinic for my checkup. The footage showed a dark sedan parked at the edge of the property. A figure in a dark jacket moved cautiously toward the cabin, envelope in hand. "They found us," I whispered, fear constricting my chest. "They found the cabin," Caleb corrected. "But they don't know what else is here. Or what we know." That night, sleep eluded me entirely. I sat by the window, watching shadows move among the trees. Possibly animals, possibly my imagination, possibly something else entirely. As dawn broke over the sanctuary, casting long fingers of light through the morning mist, I made a decision. I was done being afraid, done being the victim in a story I didn't understand. "Let them come," I whispered to the rising sun. "I'm not the girl they left behind." I was sitting at the kitchen table as the morning turned into afternoon. I had my mother's journal open in front of me, and the pages were illuminated by shafts of sunlight that were streaming through the cabin windows. Next to the journal was the threatening note that we had received the day before. The message that was written on the note was etched into my memory. "You were never meant to survive. Stop digging." But digging was exactly what I intended to do. As I worked through the journal entries, I found that they were becoming increasingly unsettling. Today, I reached an entry that was dated shortly after my 3rd birthday. Robert signed the final paperwork today. $30,000 was deposited immediately, and quarterly payments were to follow. He claims that this will solve our financial problems and give us the life that we deserve, but at what cost? The doctor explained the protocols, said that the risks were minimal, and that Elle will be helping other children by participating. However, I saw something in his eyes when he mentioned possible side effects. I should have said no. God forgive me. I should have said no. My stomach nodded as I turned to Caleb, who was reviewing financial documents at the other end of the table. "They sold me," I whispered, my voice catching, "when I was just a toddler." Caleb looked up sharply. He said, "Neurovance Research," as he pulled up a document on his laptop. I found their name on some of the medical forms that I retrieved from the storage unit. I pushed the journal toward him and finger-marked the damning entry. As he read, his expression hardened into something that was almost unrecognizable. My brother, who was gentle and protective, had been transformed by a cold fury. They are a private pharmaceutical company that specializes in neurological treatments. You think they experimented on me? The words felt surreal as they left my mouth. Not just experimented, Caleb said with a grimace. According to these bank records, your mother and father received regular payments until you were 14 years old, which is when your symptoms became too severe to hide. The revelation struck me like a blow to the body. Memories of my childhood came flooding back to me. I recalled the special doctor visits where I would be separated from my parents. I also recalled the strange-tasting medicine that made me sleepy. I also recalled the weekly blood draws that I had been told were just to make sure that I was growing properly, sweetheart. I said, my voice hollow. And then when the side effects became too severe, they abandoned me. Caleb reached across the table to take my trembling hand. This changes everything, Leah. This isn't just parental abandonment or medical neglect anymore. This is criminal. That afternoon, Anna arrived with news. She'd used her medical connections to track down a former Neurovant scientist who'd left the company under mysterious circumstances 3 years ago. Her name is Dr. Anna explained when she spread documents across the table that Irina Voss was leading research on a neurological treatment protocol when she abruptly resigned. There was no explanation for her resignation, and she did not have a new job lined up. She simply vanished from the scientific community until the previous year, when she reappeared as a professor at a community college located approximately 200 miles away from here. I asked, do you think she knows something about what happened to me? Caleb responded, it would be worth it to find out. Anna nodded. I already did. She was initially hesitant, but when I mentioned that her symptoms were similar to Leah's, she agreed to meet. However, there is a catch. She insists on complete confidentiality. She does not want any phones or electronic devices, and we will meet at a location of her choosing. 2 days later, as we were getting ready for the meeting, Caleb noticed a black SUV parked on the country road close to our property. He asked with a tense voice as he peered through binoculars. We've got company, he said. 2 men, suits, definitely not local. My heart raced. These were the same people who had come to Anna's clinic. We can't tell, but we're not taking any chances. He grabbed his keys and a backpack, already prepared for emergencies. New plan. I'll lead them away from here while you and on ahead to the meeting point. Caleb. No. I protested, but he cut me off. Leah, this might be our only chance to find out what they did to you. I'll be fine. I've got 3 different routes planned and enough survival gear to last a week if needed. His voice softened. Trust me, okay? I didn't find you just to lose you again. An hour later, Anna and I watched from a distance as Caleb's truck roared past the SUV, which predictably pulled onto the road to follow him. Once they were out of sight, Anna assisted me in getting into her unremarkable sedan, and we took a series of back roads to reach the meeting point, which was a picnic area at a state park. The picnic area was private enough to allow for privacy, but public enough to ensure safety. Voss was nothing like I'd expected. Instead of the stern scientist I'd imagined, she was a small woman in her early 50s with kind eyes and nervous hands that couldn't seem to stay still. As Anna helped me to the picnic table, Dr. Vase's gaze fixed on my trembling limbs, recognition flashing across her face. Phase 3, she said quietly. The tremors, the gradual weakness. You were in the Phase 3 trial, weren't you? I nodded. I believe that to be the case, even though I had no idea that was the name of the trial. Dr. Voss looked around anxiously before continuing his speech. I need to know how much you understand already. It puts all of us in danger to be having this conversation. When I was 3 years old, my parents entered into a contract with Neurovants. I stated that they received payments in exchange for enrolling me in some kind of trial. Anna added, her medical training evident in her precise terminology, that my guess is that the trial involved experimental neurological treatments that caused iatrogenic damage, which is defined as harm that was caused by the doctor to Leah's central nervous system. Voss closed her eyes briefly as if steeling herself. It was supposed to be revolutionary. She began a treatment for early-onset neurological disorders. The preliminary animal studies were promising reversal of symptoms neural regeneration. But when we moved to human trials, she trailed off pain-etching lines around her mouth. She looked directly at me. There were 27 children participating in the Phase 3 trial. 24 of them showed severe adverse effects within 5 years. A chill ran through me. The other three, one of whom relocated overseas with his family beyond our follow-up capabilities, were not able to be followed up on. The company was under pressure from investors. Results weren't coming fast enough, so shortcuts were taken. Safety protocols were ignored. One died in a car accident at 16, though I've always had questions about that. And then there's you. Her eyes scanned my face. You shouldn't have survived this long. The neurological damage should have been fatal by now. Is that why they want me? I asked. Because I survived when I shouldn't have. You're living evidence of what they did, Doctor. She reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. I left copies of everything before I left, including trial protocols, patient data, and internal memos discussing known risks. It won't bring back your health, but it might help you find justice. Voss said it simply. And what's worse is that you are now old enough to understand it, to speak about it, and to seek justice. As she handed me the drive, her phone buzzed with a text message. As she read it, the color left her face. We need to leave now. She showed us the message. It was from an unknown car asking for you at your apartment. The driver claimed to be your brother, but there was no brother in your file. We parted ways quickly. Dr. Voss went in a westerly direction, and Anna and I took a circuitous route back to the sanctuary. My mind was racing with everything that I had learned. Not only was he a victim of parental abandonment, but he was also a survivor of corporate medical experimentation, a living testament to crimes that powerful people wanted to be buried. When we returned to the cabin, Caleb was not there. Hours passed without any word. Anna remained with me, and we both jumped at every sound that came from outside. My phone, which was a basic prepaid model that Caleb had given me for emergencies only, buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. The message read, "Arrested. False charges. Lawyer needed storage unit on Main St. Key under 3rd Rock from North Corner. Do not come. Not safe." Anna immediately called a friend who is also a lawyer while I decoded the second part of Caleb's message, which was about the storage unit. It had to be where he'd found our mother's journal and the other evidence he'd been gathering. He wanted us to retrieve it before whoever was after us could get to it. The next morning, with Anna acting as lookout, I used the key to open the storage unit. Inside was a filing cabinet containing everything Caleb had collected. Financial records, medical documents, surveillance photos, and recordings. At the bottom of the last drawer was a sealed envelope with my name on it containing legal papers, an emancipation filing already prepared with evidence of my parents' abandonment, and a petition for an emergency hearing. That afternoon, while Anna helped me organize the evidence, I received a second text. It is my responsibility to take action now that Caleb is in custody. I had been a victim throughout my entire life, first of medical experimentation, then of parental betrayal, and now of corporate cover-up. However, I am no longer a victim. I need to go to the courthouse. I told Anna with determination while studying my voice that there is an injunction that we need to file to protect Caleb, and I need to request a formal investigation into Neurovance. Anna appeared uncertain. It is risky. You will be exposed. I am tired of hiding. They have taken enough from me. That night, after filing the necessary papers with Anna's assistance, I returned to my mother's journal and turned to the final entry, which was one that I had been avoiding. If she finds this to be a run, they will not stop until the girl is completely gone. I tried to protect her, but I failed her instead. The money is gone. Robert's gambling took it all. They know she shouldn't have survived this long. They are watching. God forgive us for what we've done. I closed the journal, and a strange calm settled over me. I looked out the window of the cabin at the dark forest beyond, and I began to whisper to the shadows. I then allowed them to come. The county courthouse steps seemed impossibly steep as I approached them 3 days later, leaning heavily on my cane. Every eye in the small crowd of reporters turned toward me. The missing girl who'd suddenly reappeared with explosive allegations against her parents and a pharmaceutical giant. Are you ready for this? The steady presence of Anna was a source of comfort in the midst of the sea of strangers. Anna murmured beside me. My heart was pounding, but my resolve was firm. I have been silent my entire life. It is time for me to speak. The press conference was an idea that had been proposed by Caleb's attorney. It was a strategic move to create public pressure and ensure my safety through visibility. He had explained that they could not make you disappear if the entire world was watching. Now, as I stood in front of the microphones, I took a deep breath and started speaking. My name is Leah Wells, and 3 weeks ago, my parents drove me to a deserted road and left me there to die because of my chronic illness. What they and the rest of the world did not know was that my condition was not natural. Rather, it was the result of experimental treatments that I received when I was a child without giving my genuine informed consent. I am one of only 3 children who have survived an experimental trial that has caused harm to 27 young lives. The company responsible for the experiment has gone to great lengths to silence me, including arranging false charges against my brother, who rescued me when our parents left me to die. My voice became stronger as I continued to detail the arrangement that had been made between my parents and Neurovance, as well as the years of mysterious treatments and the gradual decline in my health. As I was speaking, my story spread like wildfire across social media. The hashtag #JusticeForLa began trending. Other families came forward with similar stories of mysterious side effects following Neurovance trials. The public pressure worked, and Caleb was released on bail 2 days later. The charges against him were flimsy and crumbled under scrutiny. As we left the courthouse together, reporters swarmed us, but Caleb shielded me protectively, his arms steady around my shoulders. "You did it," he whispered as we climbed into Anna's waiting car. "You broke the story wide open, but our fight was far from over." As public attention intensified, we received word that Dr. Voss had agreed to testify before a federal panel investigating Neurovance practices. It was the breakthrough we needed, an insider with credibility and first-hand knowledge. 4 days before the hearing, however, Dr. Voss's home burned to the ground in what officials initially called a gas leak. She survived with severe burns. Her research destroyed. "This isn't over," I told Caleb and Anna as we gathered in the cabin, which had been fortified with additional security measures. "They are trying to discredit her just like they will try to discredit me. Therefore, we go bigger," Caleb said, his determination hardening his features. Her credibility was suddenly called into question by anonymous sources suggesting that she was mentally unstable. National exposure, a platform that they are unable to control or manipulate. The opportunity presented itself to us through a reputable investigative news program that offered us a live interview. As the makeup artist was preparing me in the green room, I caught sight of my reflection. I was pale, and I was still too thin, but I had a fire in my eyes that I had never had before. "We're on in 5 minutes," the producer announced, poking her head into the room. Caleb squeezed my hand. "You sure about this? Once it airs, there's no going back." "I've been hiding my whole life," I replied. "I'm done with shadows." The interview began with my story, the abandonment, Caleb's rescue, our discovery of the truth. The host, a veteran journalist known for her incisive questioning, listened with growing outrage. "These are extraordinary allegations," she said at last. "What evidence do you have to support them?" It was the moment that we had been preparing for. I nodded to Caleb, who handed me the folder. From the folder, I retrieved the document that had changed everything. It was the original contract that my parents had signed, agreeing to enroll me in the Neurovance experimental trial. "This is the agreement my parents signed when I was 3 years old," I said, my voice steady as I held it up for the camera. "They received $400,000 in exchange for allowing an unproven drug to be administered to their toddler." The host's eyes widened as she examined the document. "And you believe this experimental treatment caused your neurological condition?" The trial was supervised by Dr. Rena Voss, who stated that all 27 children who received this treatment developed similar symptoms. 24 of us experienced severe neurological damage, and I am one of only 3 people who survived past the age of adolescence. The interview continued, methodically building the case. When it appeared that we had said everything, I surprised everyone, including Caleb, by slowly rising from my chair. "What exactly are you doing?" the host asked, startled. With trembling legs, I stood fully upright, unassisted on national television. Pain shot through my body, but I remained standing for years. My condition has confined me to a wheelchair most days. The doctor said I would never stand on my own again. I looked directly into the camera. This is what it looks like to fight back. This is what they couldn't take away from me. My will to stand up. This moment became the defining image of our fight. It was a teenage girl who had been abandoned and betrayed. She was literally standing up against powerful forces that had attempted to destroy her. The stock of Neurovance dropped the following morning. 1 year later, I stood at the edge of the property and watched as workers installed the new sign, which read, Wells Foundation for Medical Ethics and Survivor Support. The announcement of a formal investigation was made by the Justice Department in the afternoon, and by evening, the attorney representing my parents issued a statement claiming that they had been misled about the nature of the medical trials. Justice was beginning to unfold, one painful and necessary step at a time. Despite the fact that it had undergone transformations, expansions, and renovations, the sanctuary had managed to preserve the rustic charm and security elements that had protected me throughout my darkest days. "What are your thoughts?" Caleb inquired as he approached me to stand next to me. Despite being 29 years old, he appeared to be younger than his age. The lines of anxiety that had been wrinkled into his forehead were beginning to dissolve. My response was, "It's perfect," as I leaned on my cane. I still needed it most days, but I could walk short distances without assistance now. The doctors had previously believed that such a win was unattainable. In the years that had passed since the beginning of our story, a great deal had transpired. The executives of Neurovance were the subject of criminal proceedings, and the company had been forced into bankruptcy. The relatives of fatalities and survivors were provided with a settlement fund that had been established. My parents had to face their own reckoning, which included facing legal accusations, being publicly humiliated, and becoming bankrupt. Over time, the sanctuary had developed into something that was more than just a haven to hide. We founded a charity to provide assistance to individuals who have survived medical exploitation and to lobby for more stringent safeguards in clinical trials. This organization was funded by the money from the settlement as well as donations that came in after our story was made public. Having quit her work at the clinic, Anna was now in charge of our trauma rehabilitation program. Being a war medic provided her with a unique perspective on how to assist others in recovering from the effects of abuse and betrayal. In the little cottage where ID had initially been found, she had turned it into her office. Today's session with Ryan went quite well, despite the fact that new structures that housed treatment spaces, conference rooms, and temporary housing for those who were experiencing a crisis. I stated, referring to a youngster who was 12 years old and had symptoms that were comparable to mine. He had reported coming to us 3 months earlier. It was about a minute before he stood up. Caleb flashed a grin, his expression revealing a sense of pride. He is fortunate to have a capable instructor. The main home, which was a larger version of the original cabin and was meant to satisfy both our living needs and the Foundation's administrative offices, was the destination of our journey back toward the main house. As we got closer, I observed Anna sitting on the porch, through which she was going through the mail. She called out to Leah, holding up a tiny letter and asking, "Letter for you, Leah?" My heart skipped a beat when I saw the return address. The County Hospice Center is located. It could only have come from a single individual. One sheet of paper was found within the package. Despite being wobbly, the penmanship is legible. To Leigh, I have weeks, or maybe even days, according to the physicians. There is lung cancer. Treatment is no longer an option. I am aware that you will not forgive me. I do not request that at all. Nevertheless, before I leave, I want you to know that you have always been the most powerful person I have ever met. The things that we did cannot be forgiven. Although your father referred to it as survival, it was actually greed. Not complicated at all. The woman you have developed into. Taking a stand, fighting back, and assisting other people? No, that was not us. You were the one who did that. You are always the one. Ellen Wells represents your mother. When I was finished, I gently folded the letter and placed it back in its envelope. There was no outpouring of emotions or strong feelings. Rather, it was a quiet acknowledgement that certain wounds might never be completely healed. A few bridges were never reconstructed. That evening, as I was sitting on the porch and watching the sky be painted in watercolor shades of gold and purple, I asked Caleb the question that had been lingering in my thoughts for several months. What clues did you have? How were you able to know that you were there on that night that they left me? For a considerable amount of time, Caleb remained silent as he saw the fireflies emerging from the meadow. Finally, he revealed that he had been following them for several weeks. Their sudden interest in selling the house, their internet purchases, their luggage, a map to a state where they had no contacts, and the manner in which they depleted your medical fund in modest increments to avoid suspicion are all examples of suspicious behavior." He gazed at me with eyes that were intent. I had a feeling that they were plotting something. To be honest, I had no idea what it was until that evening. "You had the option of calling the authorities." I brought it to their attention and informed them that I had a negative impression. The man gave a head shake. It was imperative that I catch them in the act. I decided to follow them that night, but I made sure to keep a safe distance from them so that they wouldn't notice me. I heard a catch in his voice when I saw what they had done. I was so close to driving them off the road. Then, however, I noticed that you were in that ditch, and the only thing that mattered was getting you to a safe place. "How come?" I inquired carefully. "Why would you put everything on the line for me after all those years and after all that time apart?" This was a straightforward response that he gave without any hesitation. "Because you were never a burden to me." The words reverberated in the peaceful evening air, the truth that had sustained us both through the most difficult times. The following day, I went to a small ceremony in town where the local council honored the work of the foundation. When I was asked to say a few words, I stepped up to the microphone without taking notes, speaking from the heart. I looked out at the faces watching me, some with tears, others with resolve. However, in the process of losing what I thought was my family, I found my true home. In the process of facing betrayal, I discovered strength that I had never known I possessed. I was thrown out to die by the people who should have protected me. I was considered a burden, a problem that should be discarded. I gestured to Caleb and Anna, standing proudly at the back of the room. And in helping others heal, I found my own path to healing. I was thrown out to die, but instead, I found my reason to live. That night after the ceremony, I walked alone to the edge of the property. The moon hung full and bright above the trees, illuminating the sanctuary that had saved me. When I looked up at the vast canvas of stars, I felt small yet significant. One life among billions, but a life that mattered, that had purpose beyond simply surviving. Footsteps crunched on gravel behind me. I refused to use the wheelchair, despite the fact that my legs were shaking from exhaustion. I was determined to stand on my own for these few precious moments. I turned to him. My brother, my rescuer, my family in the most literal sense of the word. "I'm more than okay," I said, smiling. "I'm home." Together, we stood beneath the canopy of stars, survivors of different storms who had found shelter in each other. The road that lay ahead of us would not be easy. Caleb approached me with concern in his eyes. "Would you be okay out here? It's getting cold." My condition would always present challenges, and the fight for justice would continue. However, for the first time in my life, I am facing the future not with fear but with hope. I am not simply surviving to live. Have you ever wondered how much strength is hidden beneath the surface of those people that society discards as being too broken to matter? Someone once abandoned me on the side of the road to die. Today, I am the one who is bringing down empires and transforming lives. If you found this journey from victim to winner to be moving, please click the like button and subscribe to receive additional stories that reveal the raw force of human perseverance in the face of insurmountable obstacles.